Hey, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Let's Learn with Lizzie. In today's video, we are going to study one of the most interesting prose pieces from Class 12 Flamingo textbook, Poets and Pancakes, written by the famous Tamil writer Asokamitran. This lesson is not just about literature. It gives us a fascinating glimpse into the early days of the Indian film industry, especially the working culture of Gemini Studios in Madras. Through humor, satire, and personal experiences, the author describes life inside a film studio, the personalities who worked there, the political and cultural ideas of that time, and a mysterious visit by an English poet. So let us begin a detailed explanation of this chapter. Before getting into the chapter, let's first understand the author. Asokamitran was a well-known Indian writer who mainly wrote in Tamil and English. He was born in the year 1931 and became one of the most respected voices in modern Tamil literature. For several years, he worked at Gemini Studios, one of the biggest film studios in India at that time. His job was quite simple. He had to collect newspaper clippings and store them in files for the studio. Although his job seemed insignificant, it gave him the opportunity to observe the film industry very closely. These experiences later inspired his memoir titled My Years with Boss, from which this chapter has been taken. Ashokamitran's writing style is known for its gentle humor, sharp observation, and deep understanding of human nature. Poets and Pancakes is actually a memoir, which means it is based on the author's personal experiences. In this essay, the author describes the working environment of Gemini Studios, the people who worked there, the cultural and political atmosphere of that period, and the strange visit of a British poet to the studio. The essay is written in a chatty and rambling style. One idea leads to another, and the author keeps moving from one topic to another while sharing interesting anecdotes. This style makes the essay feel like a friendly conversation rather than a formal lecture. Now let us talk about Gemini Studios. During the 1940s and 1950s, this studio was one of the most famous film production houses in India. It was founded by S.S. Vasan, who was popularly known as the Boss. The studio was located in Chennai, which was then called Madras. At that time, Gemini Studios employed around 600 workers, including actors, writers, technicians, and assistants. It was not only a film production center, but also a cultural gathering place where writers, poets, and artists frequently visited. The title Poets and Pancakes is quite unusual and humorous. Let us understand its meaning. The word pancake here refers to a type of thick makeup used in films. Actors in Gemini Studios had to apply heavy layers of pancake makeup so that their faces would look suitable under strong studio lights. On the other hand, poets refers to the many writers and poets who visited the studio. So the title symbolically combines two different worlds, the glamorous world of cinema and the intellectual world of literature. The author humorously shows how these two worlds existed side by side in the same place. The essay begins with a description of the makeup department of Gemini Studios. Interestingly, this department was located in a building that was believed to have once been the stables of the British officer Robert Clive. The room looked like a hair cutting salon with large mirrors surrounded by bright, incandescent lights. Because of these powerful lights, actors had to sit under intense heat while their makeup was applied. The author humorously describes the situation as fiery mystery. Imagine sitting under extremely hot lights while someone applies thick layers of makeup on your face. It must have been extremely uncomfortable. Another interesting point the author mentions is the diversity of people working in the makeup department. There were workers from many different regions of India: Bengalis, Maharashtrians, people from Karnataka, an Andhra Pradesh person, an Anglo Burmese, and several Tamilians. The author jokingly says that national integration existed in this department long before radio and television started promoting it. This humorous observation highlights the unity and diversity present in the Indian society at that time. Now, moving on to the hierarchy in the studio, the makeup department also followed a strict hierarchy. The chief makeup artist worked on the main actors and actresses, whereas the senior assistants handled the second hero and heroine. Junior assistants worked on comedians and smaller roles. Finally, the office boy was responsible for applying makeup to the crowd actors. During crowd scenes, he would mix large quantities of makeup in a big vessel and apply it quickly to dozens of people. This shows how organized and structured film production was, even in those early days. One of the most memorable character in this essay is the office boy in the makeup department. Despite being called a boy, he was actually about 40 years old. He had joined the studio years earlier with big dreams. He hoped to become an actor, a scriptwriter, a director, or a lyricist. However, none of these dreams came true. Instead, he ended up working as a minor assistant, applying makeup to crowd actors. This made him frustrated and bitter. He believed that his talent was not being recognized and often complained about his fate. At Gemini Studios, the author himself worked in a small cubicle with two French windows. His job was to cut out newspaper articles and store them in files for the studio. Since this work did not look very demanding, many people believed he was doing nothing. As a result, different people would come to his cubicle and start giving him long lectures about various topics. Among them, the office boy frequently came to complain about how his literary talent was being wasted. The author humorously says that he sometimes prayed for crowd shooting days so that the office boy would be busy and stop talking to him. Now let us talk about one of the most important personalities in Gemini Studios, Kotamangalam Subbu. He was considered the second most important person in the studio after the boss. Subbu was an incredibly talented and versatile individual. He was a writer, poet, actor, director, and creative advisor. His ability to come up with imaginative ideas made him extremely valuable to the studio. Subbu had several remarkable achievements. He wrote many story poems in folk style, which were very popular among the masses. He also wrote a famous Tamil novel called Tilana Mohanambal, which beautifully portrayed the lives of traditional dancers and musicians. Apart from writing, he was also a talented actor who played memorable supporting roles in films. His creativity and positive attitude made him an essential part of Gemini Studios. Despite Subbu's achievements, the office boy disliked him intensively. He believed that Subbu was responsible for his own lack of success. This shows a common human tendency. People often blame others for their own failures instead of accepting the reality. Through this character, the author gently satirizes human jealousy and frustration. Now, moving on to the other department, the story department. Gemini Studios also had a department called the story department. This department included several writers and poets who worked on film scripts. Among them was also a legal advisor who handled legal matters related to film production. Most of the writers wore khadi clothes, which reflected the influence of Gandhian ideals during that period. The legal advisor was a very unusual figure in the studio. Unlike the other writers who wore traditional khadi clothes, he dressed in Western clothes such as pants, coats, and ties. Because of his logical and serious nature, he appeared out of place among the imaginative writers and poets. Once he secretly recorded an actress who was shouting angrily at the producer. When she heard her voice played back on the recording device, she became so shocked that she stopped acting altogether. This incident ironically ended the acting career. Eventually, S.S. Vasan decided to close the story department. As a result, many writers and poets lost their jobs. Even the legal advisor lost his position. The author humorously remarks that this may be the only time in history when a lawyer lost his job because poets were dismissed. Gemini Studio often attracted famous poets such as S.D.S. Yogir, Harindranath Chatrapadhyay, They visited the studio mainly because it had a good coffee house and relaxed atmosphere. Many employees also had plenty of leisure time, which made the place suitable for literary discussions. During that period, many people in the studio admired Mahatma Gandhi and wore khadi clothes. However, they did not have a deep understanding of political ideologies. For example, they believed that communists were dangerous and immoral people. This shows how political ideas were often misunderstood during that time. At one point, a group associated with the moral re-armament movement visited Madras. This movement was founded by Frank Bachman. Its aim was to promote moral and spiritual values. The group performed two plays titled Jotham Valley and The Forgotten Factor. These plays made a strong impression on the audience. The staging of these plays was so impressive that Tamil theatre soon started copying their styles. For example, many plays began to include sunrise and sunset scenes similar to those shown in Jotham Valley. This shows how international cultural influences affected Indian theatres. Sometime later, Gemini Studios hosted a visitor from England. He was introduced simply as a poet. However, most people at the studio had never heard of him. The visitor was actually the famous poet Stephen Spender. When he delivered his speech, the audience could hardly understand him because of his strong British accent. This situation became quite awkward for everybody. The audience at Gemini Studios could not understand the poet's speech for several reasons. First, many people were unfamiliar with the English poetry. Second, his accent was difficult to follow. Third, the cultural gap between the speaker and the audience was very large. As a result, the entire event ended in confusion and silence. Later, the author discovered that the visitor was Stephen Spender, who was also the editor of literary magazine Encounter. The author realized this when he saw a short story content announcement in the newspaper. This moment helped him connect to the mysterious visit with the literary world. Some years later, the author found a book titled The God That Failed. This book contained essays written by several famous authors, including Stephen Spender. In these essays, the writer described how they had once supported communism but later became disillusioned with it. This discovery helped the author understand the political context behind Stephen Spender's visit. The essay explores several important themes like film industry's reality, which shows the behind the scenes life of cinema. Moving on to the human nature, the essay talks about the jealousy, ambition, and frustration. Then moving on to the literature versus cinema, this shows a contrast between the two different aspects. One is the creative writing and the other is the film production. Both are totally different but walking side by side. Then political and ideology, which reflects Cold War era attitude towards the communism. And finally, humor and satire. The author gently mocks human weaknesses. Ashokamitran uses a rambling narrative style. This means the essay moves from one topic to another in a very natural conversational way. His writing is filled with humor, irony, personal anecdotes, and subtle criticism of human behavior can be seen in the essay. The style makes the essay both entertaining and thought provoking. So, now let us see how Ashokamitran has used humor in this essay. For example, office boy blaming Subbu for his failure, lawyers losing jobs because poets were dismissed, actors looking hideous under makeup, the confused reception of the English poet. All these humor helps the author criticize the society without being harsh, because you cannot directly criticize a person. At the end of the day, when you're going to criticize directly, it is going to lead to hard emotions, cold emotions between the people. But when you're using satire and humor, it is indirectly criticism, which is like harmless, I can say in that way. Now let us move on to the character sketch of Subbu. Subbu is a creative genius, a loyal worker, and cheerful personality person. He is helpful and generous, and Subbu represents the dedication and talent leading to the success kind of figure. And in contrast, we are having the office boy who is frustrated, ambitious, self pitying, and jealous person. He represents unfulfilled dreams and misplaced blame kind of person. Now, moving on to some important exam points that you need to remember is the author Asokamitran and the studio founder S.S. Vasan, famous personality Kotamangalam Subbu, and visiting poets Stephen Spender, political context of anti-communist environment. These are frequently asked in board exams. To conclude, Poets and Pancakes is much more than a simple story about a film studio. It is a humorous and an insightful account of human ambition, cultural misunderstanding, political ideas, and the fascinating world of early Indian cinema. Through his sharp observation and gentle humor, Ashokamitran successfully captures a unique moment in the history of Indian films. And so that's it for today. Thank you for watching this video till the end. If you felt like this video was helpful, kindly please hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and see you soon in the upcoming video.